What's up, everyone? We have some awesome setups brewing in the market right now, and in today's video, that's exactly what we're going to cover. And towards the end, we have a $15.2 million trade. It is very rare to see the big or smart money take trades of this magnitude, so definitely make sure to stick with us all the way to the end. This trade is insane, and like I said, we have a bunch of great setups going into the rest of the week. But Tom, looking at the market today, the heat map was definitely mostly red. We had a couple sprinkles of green here and there, but the market wasn't too hot today.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't. I will say, for the most part, we actually traded off to the downside in most sectors, especially tech was really flat. Microsoft was right around break even. Google was just positive slightly. Meta was up a little bit. But then we had Nvidia, Apple, AMD, and a lot of those chip stocks kind of falling off. Now, Amazon did go up, but the banks were kind of falling off too. So very mixed day. And then the oil stocks pulled back after that humongous move to the upside from yesterday. So very mixed day. But what I will say is it seems like the market right now is starting to pull back after a huge run to the upside. So you can see on my chart right now, going back to the end of March, we started getting that big breakout with SPY above this smaller trend line here on the short term. Once we got that break, we started really popping up above $400 per share, which is right where this green arrow is. I thought that break at 400 was very significant. And ever since that break, we've had pretty good price action to the upside, even on a lot of stocks, even on Apple, Microsoft, Nvidia, AMD, other stocks like that have been exploding ever since SPY has been breaking out like that. So I feel like right now, Mike, we're kind of at this point where the market's a little bit overextended to the upside, and we could maybe see a bit more pullbacks come in. And there's a huge intraday support today, right around 407.50 on the SPY. And I feel like if this breaks tomorrow, we could possibly see good plays on SPY puts and maybe even calls on stocks like SPXS and maybe even UBXY might start to be pretty good in the short term too.
Yeah, I mean, that's an amazing point. It's like the opportunity slash setup that we have in the market right now is actually pretty good. It's like a lot of these stocks have been pretty overextended, and that's not a bad thing at all. Like, let's say you look at Apple. Obviously, it's a powerhouse and it's been running up in such a big way over the past couple of days and weeks, but it's like, obviously you can't just run up forever, right? And there's a ton of opportunity to play these pullbacks, whether it's with SPY, Apple, or even Nvidia or any other stock. So it's like we're at a point right now where I think we're set up for some pretty good opportunities throughout the rest of the week.
Yeah, I really think so too. And one of my favorite sectors right now, back to the downside, is possibly some of these semiconductor stocks. Now, I know Intel is one of our favorite stocks, and honestly, Intel's in a bit of a different setup compared to AMD and Nvidia, in my opinion. Whenever I go to Nvidia's daily chart, it's actually kind of scary how close that they've been getting back to those all-time highs. They're actually approaching a humongous resistance here, right around $290 to $300 as they hit highs around 280 here recently. So I'm really watching this one because look at this straight up momentum ever since the end of 2022. This move to the upside is insane. From the low to the high, this stock is now up 158%, or was at the high the past couple days. So I feel like that there's definitely some room to the downside on some stocks like Nvidia, AMD, maybe even Apple. Apple's another stock that has had another huge explosion to the upside as of late. But I'm really leaning more towards like Nvidia here because just those chip stocks have been insane here lately.
No doubt. And I want you to check out ticker symbol SOXS. This is basically an ETF that goes up when all of the chip stocks are falling down. And it's basically a bunch of chip stocks all in one easy to trade ticker, and it moves up in a giant way. So as we saw chip stocks sell off today, this ETF was up nearly 6%. So keep a close eye on this one. It's pretty good for like short-term moves with chip stocks. And another thing too is like the setup that we're talking about, it doesn't necessarily have to be just for tomorrow. It is possible that the market might just do nothing tomorrow, right? But that doesn't mean the setup is necessarily gone. Like, stocks don't rise just in one day, and they also don't just fall in one day. So it's like the setup and opportunities that we're talking about right now, they can take some time to start, or they could start tomorrow, but they will also last for some time as well.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like that once it finally starts to pull back and get some pretty big breaks through some of these big supports, we'll start to see some bigger moves to the downside, and we'll start to see that sell-off really start to come through. And like you said, it's going to be a waiting game almost. There's a few ways to play it. There's a lot of guys who like to play breakouts. So maybe if you see it break below 273 on NVIDIA's case, maybe that would be a good level for like a nice breakout trade if you see that below there tomorrow or over the next few weeks or something like that. And then, even on AMD, if we go over to that stock, there's a big support recently around 95. So maybe if we get below like 94.85, that could be another big area there for the next couple of days. If anyone's, looking at anywhere specific for a, break or anything like that. But honestly, I think just getting some puts and kind of swinging them to the downside here would be a good idea, unless obviously you're playing SOXS.
Yeah, all righty, good stuff. Tom, but I will say I've also had a pretty close eye on bank stocks. So as we all know, over like the past month or so, the banking industry has taken a beating, and I wouldn't say the beating is done yet. So I'm looking at Bank of America, but you can look at, basically any bank stock right now. The smaller banks are actually getting hit harder than some of the bigger banks, but either way, they all move together at the end of the day. But bank stocks were especially weak today, and they do have earnings coming up over the next couple of weeks. So either way, I am looking at bank stocks like Bank of America to the downside, for the rest of the week and maybe even tomorrow. Some of them are approaching pretty big supports made last week, and I just don't think that the total selling pressure is done quite yet, given the situation that we have going on in the financial industry.
Yeah, I really don't think so either. And I'll say your play was on Bank of America there to the downside. I'm also looking at JP Morgan to the downside today too. So that just goes to show how bearish we are on banks right now. Honestly, I just feel like there's so much bad momentum and just terrible news with banks. Like you said, the smaller ones are obviously worse than the big ones. But, whenever you see JP Morgan on a daily chart, it's kind of on the downtrend from that recent explosion, just like we're talking about with NVIDIA and AMD, like some of those stocks were kind of expecting a pullback. These bank stocks are now having some pretty significant pullbacks of their own too, with some crazy news coming in. So I definitely feel like there's more potential for these bank stocks to fall. And, I'll be watching JP Morgan. Jamie Dimon actually came out with some pretty crazy statements this morning talking about how, this could continue to go on for the next couple of years and have repercussions, obviously, for years to come. So I don't know. Jamie Dimon always makes a lot of crazy statements, though. I would take anything that guy says with a grain of salt, to be honest.
All righty. Another thing worth noting is I'm not necessarily bearish on bank stocks for the long term, but I do think in the short term they definitely have some more room down. And I feel like the perfect situation would be for some of these bank stocks to fall off more in the short term, and then give us a giant opportunity to scoop them up low and just hold.
Yeah, exactly. Because whenever we go to that daily chart, JP Morgan's definitely falling down right now a lot. But, from that low to high, from the low to where we are now, it's still up 26% from the low in October. So it's still actually up quite a bit from that low. Honestly, I could see us maybe coming back down and retesting maybe 120, even maybe 110 over the next few months in JP Morgan's case. And like you said, that would be an amazing time to pick up some shares. And even as it's falling, shorting some puts might be a good way to go. That could collect some premium in the time being. And if you start to, maybe get some breaks below, you can grab some shares at some really good prices.
All righty. Another stock I'm watching pretty closely is CANO. So you guys know I talked about this one yesterday, and this setup is definitely it's more of a risky setup than what I usually talk about. Basically, there's a lot of changes going on with this company. They're doing some asset sales. They're looking for a new CEO, and the stock is just very volatile overall. But I've been seeing a ton of bullish flow for this stock and the stock's options, where over the next couple weeks, I'm definitely looking at it to the upside. It's a crazy mover. It's high risk, high reward, but given the setup, I am a fan of it.
Yeah, I like it too. And actually, I was kind of expecting this one to maybe break today a little bit, and it tried and just kind of fell back down there towards the end of the day. So I will definitely keep it on the radar. It definitely held its ground. It's not like this had a significant pullback and closed down around 115 or 120 or anything like that. It held up very strong, up around 134, 135. So I like this into tomorrow, Mike. And man, if that momentum continues, this could end up being a crazy mover. I know a lot of people were watching this one today and waiting for that breakout, but it just never really came yet.
We will see. All right, Tom. Well, you know what time it is. It's time for those momentum plays. With the first one, we have Meta to the downside.
META. I will say this one has been blowing my mind the way it keeps going up, but it has to start to pull back here at some point. I feel like this will be one of those big areas. So if we get under this big wick intraday, right around 213.10, I will look at some puts down. Watch 213.10. That's a pretty big support. But at the same time, just be a little careful with this one. It seems like it's just on a never-ending uptrend right now.
All right, with the next one, we have Apple also to the downside.
Yeah, AAPL. Now, this one actually closed a little bit lower compared to Meta, and they are approaching a pretty big support around 165. So if we get under 165, watch for those puts.
And with the last one, we have TLT to the upside.
TLT, I'll say TNX started going crazy today. So watch TLT. If we get up above 107.80, right around that high of day, it should end up being a pretty good play to the upside. And Mike, TLT's been one of the crazier setups in my opinion lately.
Yeah, let's go. So you guys heard Tom, we have that upside level on TLT for a potential day trade to the upside tomorrow, only if it breaks above that level. And then don't forget about Apple and Meta with those potential day trade to the downside setups, only if they break below those lower levels. But it is now time for the moment everyone has been waiting for, and that is the $15.2 million trade of the day. The $15.2 million went into Intel. Yes, Intel. So more specifically, it went into the Intel 28 strike call options that expires on July 21st of 2023. So Intel is very oversold on a long-term chart, whether you're looking, no matter which way you look at it. With that being said, over the past couple weeks, it has been running up in a pretty good way. It went from like 25 all the way up to 33, which is really great. But like I said, it's still pretty oversold. Intel is a stock that obviously they're in the semiconductor industry, but they're also a little bit different because they just move different than most semiconductor stocks. And looking at the strike price of this call option, it's in the money. There's some time to the option. And it's just, it's a bullish trade overall. So basically we have some smart money trader, who works at some hedge fund or institution or, is an insider at this company, that's very bullish on this setup right now. And honestly, I don't really blame them too much, especially when you look at a longer term chart of Intel. It's a bullish setup and I don't think it's bad.
Yeah, I honestly like it a lot as well. I will say, Mike, I've traded Intel quite a bit over the past 4 to 5 years. I've swung it a few different times, and I am a little bit sad that I was not picking up shares down here around some of these big supports. That 25 support here was very, very crucial. I know that we've been talking about Intel a lot while it's been low down here, and I really hope that some of you guys at least took advantage of it in the short term at least. And I will say this is quite the uptrend. And what I like about where we are with Intel's price action is that if we actually go back, I'm not saying this is an exact like W type of pattern, but whenever we started selling down right here in September and October, this was where we had like the bigger gaps, the bigger moves to the downside. Now we're getting those bigger moves right up through those levels. So I would think maybe we could go test with that big resistance up there, maybe around 35 over the next couple weeks. I think that could be a pretty safe level, but nonetheless, it's a very crazy setup, Mike. And, it's not necessarily a perfect W, but it definitely has that type of, setup to it, for everyone who watches those technicals out there.
All right, good stuff. So, Tom, I'm pretty excited going into tomorrow. I feel like we're at a point, I know I said this a couple times already, but it's just the market is setting up in a really good way, especially for some of these stocks to pull back. And, sometimes there's some really good opportunities associated with these pullbacks, especially when you have powerhouse companies like Apple, Nvidia, and all the rest of them so overextended. So I'm pretty excited. Do you have any other thoughts before we close out?
Yeah, I could not go without mentioning one last play. I think I talked about it a little bit yesterday, is GLD and GDX. These stocks are exploding. Keep them on the radar. I will say it surprised me a lot. GLD has been going up with the market a little bit lately. Now it's starting to break out even more as the market's falling. So I will be watching this. It seems like some fear is starting to come back in. And if that's the case, GLD might keep rising. So GDX is another nice one. It's a gold miner ETF. Ended up moving 3% today. Not bad.
There we go. If you guys are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. When you subscribe, you'll see our videos recommended to you more often. And in basically every single video, we cover, multi-million-dollar hedge fund style trades, just like today's Intel setup. And those trades are very awesome because I promise you one thing, $15 million isn't just put into this trade by random chance. The people who are playing with this dollar amount is, they know what they're doing. So definitely make sure to subscribe. You'll see trades like this all the time. And then last but not least, we want to give a giant shout out to today's member of the day, Steve in the StockedUp Discord. You've been in the chat for a little bit over a year, and your activity has definitely been increasing lately. So keep up the activity. It's awesome having you in the chat. And besides that, let's have an amazing week.